chapter 7 of our book that we're going to start with today. And the title of this lesson is Unbelief. So the text that we're going to be looking at is Numbers 11 through 14. And I'll just summarize quickly what's happening in this text, and hoping everybody had a chance to read it. But if not, you're probably familiar with it. So really, there's a whole chapter on people complaining. That's how we start. So we're in the wilderness and we have people being taken care of by God. And, what kind of food did he provide for them as they were wandering in the wilderness? Manna. So it seems that manna is something that they've not seen before. So it's not like God made something appear that they were used to. This seems to be something new to them. And he provides it every day. He provides enough for them to collect on the Sabbath and to have, even though other days, if they collect too much, it would spoil. And so there's all this provision that God makes for them. And, for a while they were happy about it. And then what did they start to say about the manna?
They wanted something else. They've started complaining.
Yeah.
Yes.
Melons, man.
The cucumbers and what?
Melons, garlic.
That's right. So verse 5, we remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic, which does, I admit, sound good. But now our whole being is dried up. There's nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. So we'll come back to this point a little bit as we go through the lesson tonight. But just think about the contrast there, right? They're used to having these interesting spicy meals that they had in Egypt. Now, of course, they were slaves, so they might not have had this in abundance. But they miss it. They miss their captivity, right? They're starting to miss captivity. It's not the first time that they've started to miss captivity. They've also, as they were thirsty and as they were wandering, they've said, you might as well have just brought us back to Egypt rather than out here to die in the wilderness. And of course, they didn't die in the wilderness yet. So here they are, they're complaining about the manna. And so, Moses hears it. Moses is angry about it because he knows where the manna is coming from. And it turns out that they ask for meat. And so how does God respond?
He gave them all those quails.
Yeah, he gives them meat. So, even though Moses was upset about it and God is angry about it, he does respond to them and provides quail for them to eat. So now they have meat and quail. And so as they go here, the Lord is speaking to Moses. He's providing for them, and he's also communicating directly with Moses. And so they do have direct communication and direct care and provision from God. And we've talked about this before in here. But the Bible says in Hebrews that they weren't, the way that they were responding to God's blessings was because of their unbelief. So I think that's an interesting way to say it, right? Did they know that God existed?
Yes.
Yeah, they did. There's no way they couldn't know, right? They were led out of Egypt. Did they have direct experience with, seeing God give the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai? Yes. Did they see the fire come down? Yes. Right. They've seen with their eyes. They're eating manna that was provided directly from God here. And yet the summary of their state of mind is actually unbelief. So let's keep going. In chapter 12, after God provides quail, in chapter 12, we have Miriam and Aaron that are starting also to complain. Now they start to complain and they start to talk against Moses. And what was the particular issue that they were bringing up about what were they concerned with about Moses.
The woman that he married?
Yeah, interesting, right? Because of the Ethiopian woman who he had married. And so they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And so, and it says, and the Lord heard it. Right? So Moses, it says, was very humble. And here's the Lord who's going to call them to task here. So what is the issue? What's going on here with Miriam and Aaron against their brother? Was it really the Ethiopian woman that they were concerned about?
No, it was pride and ego.
It was the
Authority.
authority. Yeah. They felt
Yeah.
like he had just as much authority as he has.
Right, like most siblings are like, who does he think he is?
That's right. Who does he think he is? Yeah, a little bit of envy. There was 100 good words that were just said there. Pride, ego, authority. There's jealousy or envy. And, so they, whether or not they really cared about the woman he married, I don't know. It's hard to hear how that fits into this. But they bring a complaint against him. And ultimately, it seems like the root cause of that complaint has more to do with how they felt about themselves with respect to Moses than it did about the woman he married. But God answers them, right? And God essentially chastises them here. And what happens to Miriam?
Miriam ended up being put out of the camp with leprosy.
That's right. So Miriam is struck with leprosy. And Aaron immediately realizes kind of what's happening. And, he says, oh, we've sinned. And he essentially prays for her. And Moses also prays for her. And so, so God does respond, but she does have to be put out of the camp for 7 days. And when she comes back again, she's able to be healed. Yeah, go ahead.
On that note about Marion, I think the Lord sort of like, I wouldn't say the Lord did, but you'll put her in the same position that Eve was. She was the
Yes.
woman who decided to make some decisions and be in charge, and what happened to her. And then you look at Marion following up on this in the same way. The Lord gave her a whole week.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and the servant, that leprosy. And Moses prayed for her, he pleaded.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. We'll come back and pick up some similarities to Eve. There's a lot of similarities to what's happening here with Eve. So, all right, we've got people complaining about their food. We've got Aaron and Miriam complaining about Moses, that they want some sort of position. They're worried about his authority over them. Then we have in chapter 13, the spies that are sent out. And so God tells Moses, send people from each tribe into the land of Canaan and tell them to go and scout out the land. And so somebody tell me what happens in chapter 13. Tell me about the spies. How many were there? 12, right? One from each tribe. And they went and they looked, and what did they see when they went into the land of Canaan? Is it a good place or it's not a good place?
Julie said it was
Grasshopper.
Yeah.
They're giants, and we can't go up against them. And then, but the Jew said, "It's a land that's making honey, and we can take them. We can start. They'll be with us."
Right. Okay. So I guess I'll ask you this. Was it a good place or a bad place?
It was bad, but soon to become good.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question, right? Like, were the 10 spies who didn't want to go, they clearly didn't have faith in God, but were they wrong about what they observed? No, they observed, this is going to be tough. And, there are people here bigger than us. And yet the two that saw what was good in the land, what did they bring back? In verse 23, they carried a bunch of grapes. And how big was it?
2 people had to carry it.
Yeah, 2 people on a pole had to carry this giant cluster of grapes. So this is a land, God, this is the promised land. This is where God is bringing them back. This is the land that was given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. we've come a long way, all the way down through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph in Egypt. We're coming back. So this is the kind of the buildup of this history, and now you're coming into this land. And later on in Deuteronomy, we'll read as we get there about how God said, "I'm giving you houses you didn't build, and cities you didn't fortify, and vineyards you didn't plant, and you're going to come in and it's just given to you." So there's a sense in which this place is already prepared for them, and that it's theirs for the taking, and it's so rich with food, all that food that they complained about back here in chapter 11, or what chapter was that? Yeah, chapter 11, that they wanted all this variety of food and all the tasty things, and here this land is full of all those things that they can just come in and take. So there's a sense in which this land is, it's the promised land, and it's very good, but it's going to come at a price. And so the 10 spies were not incorrect, but they suggested that we shouldn't go in and do it. In fact, in chapter 14, when they come back and bring their report, here's Israel. It says, "So all the congregation," it's so pitiful, "lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night." Right? They can't even imagine, how are we getting, here we are in the wilderness, and we can't even get into this land because it's so terrible. All these people are already occupying our land. And so, again, they say, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt. If only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword?" So, their reaction to this, this is again a point here of unbelief, right? They're going to complain about the situation here. I mean, would God have brought them all this way and then not brought them into the land that he had promised them? It's a little unreasonable, I think, from our perspective, but they all wept and cried.
He'd already told him, "I'm giving you."
Yes.
this land."
Yes, that's right. They in a sense, it was already theirs, right? It had been the land of promise. And so, when God said it was going to be their land, it was going to be their land.
So you have
Um,
to ask
yeah.
why did they bother to go?
exactly.
Because the Lord already told them everything they needed to know.
No, that's right. And you can hear the unbelief, and we're going to come back and look at that word a little bit, but the unbelief here. So here they are all crying, and then here in verse 6, it says, "But Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. They spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, 'The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he'll bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only,'" listen to what he says here, "do not rebel against the Lord." I'm in verse 9, 14:9. "Nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." And all the congregation, how did the congregation react to that news? Verse 10.
That dispelling.
I didn't hear it.
Okay,
Did somebody say it?
Susan.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Egypt, you're complaining, you're crying. You have all of this going on. You complain, the Lord hear you. He brought you from the land of your complaints. Take you somewhere, he's gonna take you somewhere. And then you still complain.
Yeah. Yes.
So
All along the way, while you're being rescued, you're complaining too. And then, here's your next land, and you don't like that either.
yes.
It's interesting, they were complaining that the men over there were stronger. How'd they know that? They were giants. But yet God brought them through the Red Sea against Pharaoh and a whole army.
I mean, think of the plagues in Egypt, right? I mean, start way back with, Moses showing signs, and then the plagues in Egypt. You could think of everything leading up to this point. Should they have known that they were going to be okay here?
They should have known.
Yeah.
Man.
I think the Israelites had an attitude problem. No, and I think their attitude was whatever they felt like they want, they can get, and they didn't have to do anything for it. So the more you give, the more you want. It's like a spoiled child.
Yeah.
know, you keep
No.
giving and keep giving and you're never satisfied with anything. And, you know, like the people who got a lot of money and got kids, and the kids expect for you to pay for everything and they don't care.
Right.
No, no gratitude, no thank you for nothing. Just give, give,
Right.
give. That's what
Right.
I'm attitude.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting that you said little kids, because I feel like sometimes teenagers, right? Like,
Yeah.
but ultimately, and we haven't really finished the whole thing, um, because the reaction of the congregation here was to stone the messengers, right? Kill Joshua and Caleb. They wanted to stone them, which is a completely unreasonable thing, right? Like, let's not have a conversation. If you bring a different message or a message of hope, we should get rid of you. And it turns out in the end, Moses intercedes and tries to kind of correct the situation, which he does quite a bit. And then in the end, it's the 10 that end up being stoned, and God punishes them really for their unbelief, except for Joshua and Caleb. And this is the point where they're actually told, you know what, none of you are going in.
Mhm.
And so, all of them, including Moses, right? Moses had already had his issues, but none of them are going to go in. And so they're all going to die here in the wilderness. This is why. This culmination of events is why. They do then, right at the end of 14, and we'll probably pick this up next month, but right at the end of 14, they make an attempt to take the land, and they fail, and we'll get into that next time. But there are a couple of things here in these instances that the name of the chapter here in our book is Unbelief, and to me that word is, I don't know that I would have said it's unbelief, but sure enough, in Hebrews chapter 9, we do see that the word is unbelief. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 19. I'm going to read that and turn over there. I might want to keep a finger in Hebrews, because Hebrews is where we hear this exact situation used as an example. And I'm actually going to make this parallel here for us. And then I want us to go back and think about all the ways that we see unbelief here, and think about maybe our own application to our own selves. Because we sort of marvel at the unbelief of the Israelites here, but I'm not sure that we're so different from them sometimes. So Hebrews chapter 3, in verse 19, and I'll actually back up a little bit. Actually, let's start in verse 12. I'm going to read Hebrews 3, verse 12. It says, beware, brethren, and the reason I'm going to pick up there is this word, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end, while it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who, having heard, rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Now with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who did not obey? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. And so in this passage, in Hebrews, of course, we've studied Hebrews in this class before, but I'll just give a little summary. Hebrews is written to Christians who were dispersed throughout the known world at that time, away from Jerusalem, and they were undergoing all kinds of persecution, to the point that they actually considered going back to Judaism, right? They actually considered being Jewish in the Roman Empire of that day to be less problematic than being a Christian in the Roman Empire in that day. So, whether that was true or not, I don't know. But, we do know Christians were persecuted, and the Jews, I guess, had sort of assimilated into Roman society, if you will. But they were actually considering abandoning Christianity and going back. And so the Hebrews writer is taking them through this logical argument all the way through the book of Hebrews, that where he uses the Israelites as the example. And he's saying here, essentially, why would you go back? This is such a better way. And he's drawing all the comparisons between the systems of the Old Testament, the law of the Old Testament, and comparing that to the New Testament and talking about how much better the law of Christ is and Christ as our high priest and so on. So that's the overarching theme of the book of Hebrews. And we can see here, right in verse 12, he talks about an evil heart of unbelief. Beware lest there's an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. And then he talks about don't be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And this is a great passage to show in verses 18 and 19. It says, to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest? But to those who did not obey. So we see that they could not enter in because of disobedience, unbelief, right? So that's a great passage to show somebody who maybe is of a belief only persuasion that in the New Testament, and we'll look at the Old Testament now too, but at least in the New Testament, there is an equality between unbelief and disobedience. So if you don't obey, it's because you don't believe. You don't really believe it. So you can't say, oh, I believe, but I don't need to obey. Right? You can't say that. That's not logical according to these passages here. So they could not enter in because of unbelief. So going back now to our Numbers 11 through 14 section here, I thought it would be interesting to think about all of the ways that we see, and there are different groups, different people having different types of sins, but all of them are sort of lumped together so they didn't get in because of their unbelief. They wouldn't obey. And so they didn't go into the promised land because of their unbelief. So just between 11 and 14, there are several examples, right? The first one with the food situation, what's the unbelief there? What's the sin there?
Like a faith.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Where they complained about the food.
Ingratitude.
Yeah. So it's maybe not summed up in a single word, right? It might need some explanation, but the unbelief here is not that they weren't aware that there is a God. It wasn't that they weren't aware that he had blessed them. It's that it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. So somebody said ingratitude, I think. Is that a word I heard in the room there? Yeah, something like that, right? Not recognizing here is the Lord. I keep using the word rescue, right? He's rescued them. He's taken them from their slavery and brought them into this situation. And it doesn't mean it's easy right away, right? He's leading them through down a path to a promised land. And I mean, we're going to have to draw the parallel to us, right? When we're rescued from our sinful state, we're led on a path through the rest of our life, and we're headed towards the promised land. So it's not the case that, you're baptized and then you're in heaven right away. There's a long path through sometimes a tough wilderness. And sometimes I think, this made me think a lot this month as I was preparing for this, are there times when along that path, the things that God has provided for us are not good enough for us.
We complain.
And we complain, right? And think
I
of,
was back in the world. I used to be able to do this, and now it's so restricted. I can't have any fun. And
yeah,
Thou shalt not kill.
that's right. I remember how it was, right? It was great when the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks, right? That was tasty. And, it's no one's denying that there were those things in Egypt. Right? They had probably good food in Egypt. I imagine there's still good food in Egypt. I don't know that they had it in abundance, like we said, right? But, it's now you're eating manna and yeah, you're eating it every day. But think about the parallel. Yeah, go ahead.
When they were in bondage, when they were back in Egypt, they were in bondage. I mean,
yes,
cucumbers may have been a luxury for them. It wasn't something they were getting every day.
Right. That's right.
They were being mistreated.
That's right.
Everything. And now they got freedom. And once they get the freedom, that don't even appreciate the freedom.
That's right. Yeah.
Also put it up, if you were to use the contrast of today's Christian coming out of the world into Christianity at some point in some time in their lives when they go through things, they think about the things they used to do and what things they could do. And they look back at that and think, man, I should have stayed where I was. I was doing pretty good at another church or whatever. It's all a comparison of life of what you have and what you don't have. You're going to compare and think about it, but if you're not strong enough as a Christian, you'll drift back into that world again.
Yeah.
But thinking you're missing something, and when you realize you haven't missed a thing.
Yeah. And, even if, this is not the gospel of prosperity, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that when you become a Christian, there are religions that teach that, you become a Christian and then you're going to be rich, you never have another problem. Like, that's not the promise of God. So sometimes it's true that the situation you find yourself in, and I mean, there are lots of ways to apply this, right? Like there's, there have been times I work in compliance, and there have been times that I have had to say to sort of powerful people, like, we're not doing that because it's not right. And I've never been, my job has never been on the line for that, but it's crossed my mind, right? Like, there are times in your Christian life where you may be put in a situation where you may lose some things. It may cost you to do what's right. And, that's the equivalent of getting manna every day, right? God's still providing for you. Right. Maybe it's not the same thing you had before, but when you walk with him, he's going to be with you and he'll take you through to the other side. So there are lots of ways that you could apply that. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that piece. Yeah, go ahead.
When we're talking about all this, to me, the Israelites, it's unbelief too, but my mind keeps going to, even though they were in bondage, that was their comfort zone. They at least knew what was going on. They knew what to expect. They knew what was going on. They knew where they were. Every day was the same. It was their comfort zone. And we go through the same thing. We're like, where we're at may not be, where we should be, or it may not be the best place, but at least we know what to expect. We have to leave that,
to make a change, right? You got to make a change.
Some people don't like change.
Yeah. I don't like change, but
nobody does, I don't think. But
maybe that's why I have
control over that. Some people like to control. They like making their own, going their own pace and doing their own thing.
I'm not gonna
Not putting all the trust in God and let him take care of it, which he was doing, if you could see, but that was not the point.
But Susan, they were told to go and possess it. All they had to do was go and God had already given it to them. But to me, that's like a test, if you will. You either gonna go and do what God said or you're not. And that they failed the test because they chose not to do it. When they said they're looking at human eyes, we can't do this. But they forgot who was in front of them. God had already been there, done that. He knew that he was going to protect them.
Well, all they had to do was tell them it was going to be easy.
No, but I'm saying you go and possess the land. All he had to, they just had to just follow his goal, and he was, just like he caused him a wall to fall down by you walking around. Come on.
Yep. That's right.
You're walking on dry ground. Just this is the God that's telling you to go. So like I said,
he was with them. He was with them every single day.
Yeah.
They got the manna every day. Yes. They had the cloud and the pillar of fire every day.
Never left them.
So they had constant reminder
right
with them, and they still didn't have faith.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it. And so we've skipped, we're going to come back and pick up 12, but move on to here in, I guess, 13 and 14. So this situation Tony's mentioning here with the spies, let's talk about that. Like the unbelief. So again, unbelief, right? They weren't going to go in because of their unbelief. And so, this is a little bit different. This isn't just complaining about what you have or being dissatisfied with the blessings. This is a lack of what? There's a word I'm looking for, but
Faith.
faith. Yeah, I was going to say trust, but yeah, faith will do.
Trust.
Yeah, so here that, just like Tony said, you made the beautifully made the point here that, all they had to do was go in and God didn't say it was going to be easy. But interestingly, I'm really glad you mentioned Jericho, because think about Jericho for a moment, right? Jericho was the first city. And of course, later, right, when Joshua takes over. So we go through 40 more years before we get to this point. But, when they actually did go in and take the land, the first battle was Jericho. And I mean, how many people died of the Israelites?
None.
0, right? How many times did they have to draw their swords?
None.
0, right? How many did they go hungry? No. What happened in Jericho? What did they have to do?
Follow the Lord's instructions.
They just walk around the city, right? Like, I mean, was it easy?
No.
I mean, turns out it
Yeah,
was, right? Like,
Jack said you have to do some work. It's never your faith is working.
Put it in.
Yeah.
God tells you to do, you do it. It's work. Is it easy? No, but you do it.
sometimes it could be easy. I mean, I guess I'm,
They literally just had to
Walk around and blow trumpets. I mean,
And not all of them had to blow a trumpet.
oh,
that's right.
Right.
So in that case, now that wasn't the only type of conquest, right? They did have to fight in some other places. And in fact, they didn't obey and
They didn't.
right. But in the case of Jericho, the first city, it was pretty easy. If they just, all they had to do was do what God said, and that wall fell down, right? They didn't have to pick it down. They didn't have to push it down. They didn't have to climb over it. It fell down. And so there are times when God tells us to do something, like it really is, all you have to do is do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy, but sometimes maybe it is easy. And I guess I'm trying, I was thinking about the kind of the parallels to this. What are our things that God has asked us to do that maybe we view as like, oh, I could never, right? That's what the Israelites were saying. God says, go. And, the Israelites, they cried about it. We can't. There's no way. They cried and wept, it says. Lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept. So they thought it was so difficult that God was asking them to bringing them to this point, and there's no possible way. So just think for a moment, is there anything in your, I mean, you can say it or not, but is there anything in the Christian walk that God has said do that we feel is just too hard to do? I can't do that.
I just think about, with Jeff with the cancer and stuff, and we're told to have faith and, not to worry and, as hard as we try, we don't always succeed.
Yeah.
I think about the part of the complaint. When you aggravated about something and you whine and complain about it, suck it up and move on, because this too shall pass. That
Might pass.
you have to take that kind of attitude, because you don't really. It's like how you have to think about the fact that you want things done the way you want it done, but it's not
Right.
like saying it's not being done. But you just have to face the reality of it and just move on and stop worrying about it, because it's
Right.
real things.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? There are, you might even think of kind of complaints within a congregation. Not, there's nothing wrong with any of the congregations I'm sure that we all are members of, but it could happen, right? That you think somebody should do something differently, or you think somebody's not working hard enough, or you think, and, what if that's just mine to do? Maybe I should go do that. the other example that kept coming across my mind, mainly because we've talked about it in other settings recently, is evangelism, right? What about sharing the gospel with somebody? Have you ever, you don't have to answer this question. Have you ever been talking with someone and you're standing there and it crosses your mind, ooh, that was an open door. I should say something, but you don't. Have you ever been, you don't have to answer, but
Yes.
have you ever had that happen, right? I have. I've had that happen and I've regretted it. And, that's a situation that I feel like, this is to me a Battle of Jericho situation, right? Where's the power? Is it me? Is God expecting me to deliver the eloquent, let me tell you, like that? I don't need to do that. I just need to share the gospel and the work is done already.
Exactly.
Right. So that spoke to me when I thought about this particular example where, just go do it. Just go take the land. And, they were worried. It was scary, right? I've been scared, right? Do I say something? Do I, yeah, I should say something. So, and there are probably another 100 examples of that, but I was trying to think inward, right? It's easy to pick apart the Israelites and how they reacted here, but these are lessons for us. Let's not not get into the promised land because of unbelief, right? This is unbelief. God calls this unbelief. It's not, God didn't call it, well, they were just a little afraid. And so this was unbelief. And in fact, they were punished for it for 40 years. Yeah, Stacy, go ahead.
I think even more so, we should look at the fact that he equated evil heart of unbelief.
Yes.
Evil and unbelief. He equated those two things.
That's right.
That's something that should make us take notice.
Right.
Yeah. That's harsh language, right? And I don't think of myself as having an evil heart. And I don't think of myself as having unbelief. But there have been times when I didn't obey.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, it made me reflect like this example here. All right. Anything else on this point? And we'll go back and pick up Miriam, which is maybe our longest point. All right. So turn back to chapter 12. And this example here, what's the sin here? We talked about it a little bit, but Miriam and Aaron speaking against Moses. What's the sin here?
Good question.
Say it again. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Then you always said.
Jealousy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, jealousy or envy. He brought out in the book a proverb. Let me see if I can find where it says it. I think Proverbs 27:4. It's written in your book. Wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? So yeah, they thought that they should have, somebody I think earlier said authority, right? Moses had this authority and they said, well, hasn't the Lord indeed spoken through us? And you know what? He had. Miriam was a prophetess, right? And Aaron had, both of them had sort of a measure of authority and of miraculous gifts, if you will. And so it's true that they both had God had provided them with some special blessings, but they looked at Moses and said, whatever he was doing, whatever it was that set them off here, they were envious of him and they rejected his authority. Somebody was going to say something. I'm sorry. Maybe not. Okay. Sorry. I thought I heard. So they were rejecting his authority. And this is indeed very similar to our friend Eve. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we were asking what verse it was in Proverbs.
Oh, I'm sorry. Proverbs 27:4 says that.
That's right.
And there are a couple of other verses here. James 3:16, if you're making notes about envy. James 3:16 also says envy is accompanied by confusion and every evil work. And then there's just some other examples of envy driving people to do things, including the Jews delivering Christ, mostly for envy. So Yeah, and there's, so let's draw the parallel here with Eve. So there's a point made in the book and also in several commentaries here in verse 12, in chapter 12, verse 1, that says, Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. And there's a point made usually in in the Hebrew text, you would not see the woman listed first. You would see the man listed first. And perhaps there's some significance here that Miriam is listed first in that she's possibly the one that took the lead. And maybe that's why we also see her being punished the way she is with the leprosy. So what's the parallel here with Eve? Who sinned first, Adam or Eve?
Adam. Adam came first.
No, who sinned first?
Oh, okay, I was like,
And then she gave to Adam. So
Yeah.
in first.
Yeah, Eve sinned first. Now it didn't take her much to get her husband to follow her, but she did sin first. And so the parallel here is that here's Miriam sort of taking the lead. So there's perhaps a second sin here that has to do with authority. Somebody said the word authority, and I'm glad you said that, because I think the sin might have to do more with submission. Now, Moses isn't her husband. I don't mean the submission to your husband, but submission to authority in general. And so, that's from the very first sin. That's been an issue.
okay, because Miriam was the eldest. She was the eldest of the siblings.
She was the eldest, but I don't know. There are a couple of commentaries, and also in the book, there was the note that her being listed first could be a reference to her taking the lead in initiating this situation. And then, also the fact that she was the one that was struck with leprosy rather than Aaron. So Aaron, when you think about Aaron and kind of his, all that we know about Aaron was not necessarily a leader, right? He was maybe more of a follower.
Israel taught him
No,
the golden calf.
He just threw this came out, and it just out a golden calf.
Right, that's right. Whoops.
Sounds like a kid lion, like.
Yeah. And he also, Moses was the one that was called. And in fact, Moses, the point was made in the book, Moses was this humble servant. Moses even resisted, God was saying, you're going to be the leader. And he was like, no, I'm really not. I'm really not. Right. He had to God had to get mad at him. And in fact, he was told, fine, bring your brother. Right. And so Aaron was kind of brought along to be the mouthpiece. And so I think, Aaron had some measure of gift here, but he was not in charge in any way. Moses was the one that was chosen.
Actually, look at it. You look at the fact that you have 3 siblings there,
Mm.
and the Lord was the one who made the choice of which one He wanted to use.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Miriam here, there's a lot to talk about with submission and submission. I know not everybody in the room maybe is married. If you are, there's a particular submission that you're called to, and that's to your husband. But there's submission all over the place, right? Where we're supposed to submit to one another, just as members of the church. That's one. What are some other places where we have to submit?
Work. I was gonna say work because
Yeah. Yep. Your boss, right? The person who employs you.
the government.
The government. Good. One more.
We don't call
Say
it
again.
speak.
It is within the church.
Well, civil authority in the church.
The church. There we go. Okay. So whether
Right.
that's right, whether you have elders or not, but at least to the men of the congregation, if you don't have an eldership, but certainly to the eldership. So, we just studied not long ago at Orange Street, we studied, we had a class on wives, the role of a wife. And, we talked a lot about different aspects of that. But one of the ideas that when we talked about submission, I said, think about for a minute, what is the opposite of submitting?
In charge, ruling over.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean there are lots of words, right, that you could use, but yeah, being in charge, or
As she
no,
said, rebelling.
there's a good one. Defiance is maybe another one. The word that in the New Testament, one of the words that's used for submit really means yield, and you can think of like a yield sign on the road.
Mhm.
So if you're asked to yield, do you go first?
No.
No, you
No.
wait, right? So
Mhm.
there's this, that's the word that's used, yield. So, let somebody else go. You let them go. They have, how do we say it in the road? The right of
Wait.
way, right? They have the right of way.
Mhm.
And so that's a way to think about, if you're, because sometimes submission can be a complex thing, right? What's really happening? What did he say? And did he mean? And what does he expect of me? You can get into all of that, but really the crux of the matter is, are you yielding, or are you taking your right of way? That's the crux of the matter, right? Are you submitting, or are you defying? Right. So I think in every situation, not just your husband, but also, with the elders make a decision. Um, am I going to submit to that, or am I going to yield to that? Or do I feel like I have the right of way? It's just a contrast that as you're thinking about those things, as you're in those situations, try to step back and think of it maybe more simply. You're either yielding or you're not. So the situation here with Miriam, I think, was more that, right? She was not yielding to whatever Moses' authority was in that moment. She decided that she was going to take her right of way. And I think that maybe is more, driven by envy, but the lack of submission to the authority was maybe more the point. And that's the parallel with Eve. Yeah, a hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that sometimes, in like, learning to drive,
Mm.
if anybody else has been told this, but I always learned just because you have the right of way doesn't mean you insist on it. Because you have it.
No, we don't.
You don't. Great.
Yeah, there's some wisdom to be applied, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What you trying to say about me? Because
I wasn't saying anybody in particular, Olivia.
I was going to say, Olivia, have you heard that before?
I said
that to a kid today. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean it's a check yourself moment, right? In any place of authority. I mean, picture yourself at coming into a rotary or wherever you have a yield sign, you're yielding. Right? There are times that you see this person coming and they're going so slow and you have to wait, right? That you can't just jump out in front. It doesn't matter what they're doing, right? They have the right of way. And it's something to think about, especially I think in an eldership and sometimes even in a home. The probably you don't really know the situation where the elders have made a decision and maybe you don't like it. You probably don't have all the information. And I would say consider that to be like, I don't have to come into a congregation. I do this at work all day, right? I have responsibilities at work. When I come into worship, it's rest for me not to have to make those decisions. I'm going to yield, right? I don't need to, I don't need that responsibility. The elders have that responsibility. And when you think about it that way, think of the respect that they need, right? Think of what Moses was bearing here. He had to pray on behalf, go back to chapter 11. He heard them complaining. He gets on his knees. Wait a minute, don't punish them, right? He was worried about the people. He interacted with God on behalf of the people. And, Aaron and Miriam really should have recognized he's got his own burden here. Let him deal with the burden. You support him. You yield. He has his own work to do. So a lesson for us as we think about submission, in all the various aspects of the, places we need to submit. And I do think it's a, I don't know, it's hard to do, right? There's a reason that it's a theme throughout scripture. I think it's particularly hard to do for women. So, but we're called to do that. And that's something to check yourself. So, okay, any other thoughts on that? I think we're at time, and that's actually, those are all the points, those three situations that I think are somewhat different sins, all called unbelief. And just challenging ourselves in, for those three situations where we could face the very same thing, to be just to consider the way the Israelites reacted versus the way we react. Do we have a heart of unbelief, an evil heart of unbelief, or are we going to be welcomed into the promised land? All right, we'll close with that. Thank you for your comments, everybody.